What if the real reason Hobbs stayed away from Dom for so long was never about ego or contracts, but about a betrayal that was never shown on screen? Because if you rewatch Fast 8 and Fast X closely, Hobbs and Dom are never actually on the same side, they just fight the same enemy. And that is a huge difference. Dom believes in family above everything, even when it costs lives, while Hobbs believes in control, order, and sacrifice, and those two philosophies cannot coexist forever. That prison fight in Fast 8 wasn't just fan service, it was the breaking point. Hobbs realized Dom would always choose his people even if the world burned, and Dom realized Hobbs would always choose the mission even if family stood in the way. And here is the theory. Universal never finished that storyline on purpose because Hobbs walking away wasn't a loss, it was a setup. A setup for a version of Hobbs who doesn't need Dom's approval and doesn't care about the family code. And that is why their conflict is never resolved, it is frozen, waiting for the right moment. Imagine Fast 11 opening with news reports calling Hobbs a rogue asset, blamed for an operation gone wrong, while Dom is forced to decide. Does he protect the man who saved his family before, or the family that defines him? And that is where the emotional nuke drops. Hobbs versus Dom. Not fists, not cars, but ideology. And the scary part is, Hobbs might be right, which would shatter everything Fast and Furious ever stood for. And if that confrontation never happens on screen in Fast 11, it doesn't mean it is cancelled, it means Universal is saving it for something bigger, something final, something that could redefine who the real hero of the Fast universe actually is. And here is where it gets darker, because what if Hobbs didn't just walk away from Dom but was ordered to watch him? What if after Fast 7 the agency started seeing Dom not as a hero but as a potential global threat? A man who can gather elite drivers, soldiers, hackers, and pilots in hours without any government control. And guess who was the only one strong enough to stop him if things went too far? Hobbs. That would explain everything. Why Hobbs is always one step behind Dom, why he never fully trusts him, and why he never truly joins the family. Because he wasn't there to belong, he was there as a failsafe. And Dom sensed it. That is why there is always tension, even when they joke, even when they fight side by side. Dom knows when someone is family and when someone is watching. And imagine the twist. Hobbs refusing that final order. He is told to take Dom down for good, but instead he disappears and becomes the rogue agent they blame everything on. Suddenly Dom realizes the truth. Hobbs didn't betray him, the system did. And now Fast 11 isn't about stopping a villain, it's about choosing sides. Dom between family and freedom. Hobbs between duty and loyalty. And that is why Hobbs and Shaw 2 makes sense, not as a sequel but as a bridge. A story showing Hobbs fully breaking away, becoming something the Fast universe has never had before, a lone protector outside the family and outside the law. And when he finally meets Dom again, it won't be with fists or engines but with one sentence that changes everything: "You were never my target, you were my responsibility." And that moment could either reunite the Fast family or destroy it forever depending on what Dom chooses next. And what if the real reason Hobbs never fully returned wasn't ego or contracts, but something much bigger, something Universal is hiding? What if Hobbs knows how the Fast saga is supposed to end, and that ending doesn't include Dom alive? Imagine this. Dom's final race, his last sacrifice, is already written, and Hobbs is the only character who has seen the full picture. That is why he stays away. That is why he builds his own path with Shaw, fighting global threats instead of street wars. Because the closer he gets to Dom, the harder it becomes to let him go. And here is the insane part. Hobbs and Shaw 2 could secretly show events happening at the same time as Fast 11 but from the shadows. While Dom thinks he is choosing family, Hobbs is cleaning the mess behind him, erasing governments, fake villains, and betrayals we never see. And the final scene isn't an explosion or a race, it's Hobbs standing alone, watching Dom disappear into legend, knowing he could have stopped it but chose not to. Because family isn't about saving someone forever, it's about letting them finish their story. And that is why Hobbs may never fully return in Fast 11, not because he doesn't matter, but because he matters too much. And when the credits roll, the audience will finally realize. Hobbs wasn't missing. He was protecting the ending all along. But here is where it gets darker, because what if Hobbs didn't just see the ending, what if he caused it? What if the moment Dom and Hobbs clashed years ago, Hobbs made a choice not as a cop or his family, but as a guardian of the entire saga? Imagine this, a classified mission before Fast 11 where Hobbs is shown a future where Dom survives and the world burns. Governments fall, street wars go global, and family becomes a symbol everyone dies for. Hobbs understands that Dom alive means chaos, while Dom as a legend means balance. So Hobbs disappears not to run, but to prepare. Hobbs and Shaw 2 isn't just a spin-off, it is a containment story. Every villain they stop and every secret they bury is another step toward locking Fast 11 into its final path. The most insane twist is that the final conversation between Hobbs and Dom doesn't happen on screen, it happens through actions. Dom races toward destiny believing he chose it himself, while Hobbs stands behind the curtain making sure there is no way back. When Fast 11 ends, people will argue for years, was Hobbs the hero or the real villain? Because he didn't betray family, he sacrificed it. And that is the truth Universal will never say out loud. Hobbs isn't missing, Hobbs is the reason Fast and Furious can end it all. What if Hobbs was never meant to fight Dom again because the real conflict was already decided years ago when Hobbs chose order and Dom chose family? Fast 11 isn't about their reunion, it is about the consequences of that split. Behind the scenes, Hobbs has quietly become the shadow architect of the entire saga. Ever since Hobbs and Shaw, Universal has been testing a dangerous idea. What happens when you remove Dom from the center and give the keys to someone who represents pure force and global scale? The answer scared them, because it worked. Hobbs doesn't just chase cars, he destabilizes governments and shuts down wars before they start. That is why Hobbs and Shaw 2 isn't a side story, it is a pressure valve designed to clean the world before Fast 11 even begins. There is a growing theory that while Dom is preparing for his final run, Hobbs is already 3 moves ahead, eliminating threats Dom would never touch because they are too political and too dirty. That is why Fast 11 feels smaller and more personal, because the big monsters are already gone. Insiders suggest Dom never directly meets Hobbs in Fast 11 not because of scheduling, but because their meeting would break the illusion. If Dom realized Hobbs was pulling strings the entire time, the family narrative would collapse. Instead, Hobbs becomes a ghost presence. Every clean escape, every perfect coincidence, and every enemy who never shows up is Hobbs' fingerprint. The real emotional payoff isn't a punch or a race, it is the realization that Hobbs sacrificed his place in the family so Dom could finish his story as a hero, not as a weapon. That is why Hobbs and Shaw 2 might actually be set after Fast 11, showing Hobbs alone dealing with the fallout of Dom's choices, carrying the weight of a world that survived because one man stayed in the shadows. The final twist Universal would never put in a trailer is the possibility that Dom figures it out in the last minutes. Not through dialogue, but through absence, realizing that the reason everything finally ends is because someone made sure there was nothing left to fight. And that someone was Hobbs. The saga leaves us with one question: did Hobbs save Dom, or did he erase himself so Dom could remain a legend? If Fast 11 is the end, then Hobbs and Shaw 2 isn't a sequel, it's the epilogue that explains everything.